Are you trying to dominate your fantasy football league? Do you want so many championship rings it's impossible to sign autographs? Well, crack open a beer, pour yourself a glass of bourbon, and settle in, because you've come to the right place. Welcome to Hammercast.
Welcome to the Double D's podcast, which is part of the Hammercast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Coleman, and on this episode of the podcast, we have special guest Austin, a.k.a. Debbie Dietz, who is the co-host of the Debbie Debate, the Campus to Canton podcast, and the recently created Campus to Canton website. I don't know how he has a day job because he's got all that stuff going on with Debbie. Austin, I appreciate you coming on. Why don't you tell us about your website? Because that's something that I think is fantastic. I'm so excited to dive into it. And it's really, you have all kinds of great people I love and respect over there. So why don't you tell us about that thing?
Sure. Yeah. First, thanks for having me on. Always, enjoy reading all your stuff and listening to the pod, watching the live shows. So it's fun to be on here with you. The website has been very, very exciting. It was kind of the brainchild, I guess, of me and Colin Decker, my co-host over at the Campus to Canton podcasts. And just before we were set to launch in January, we kind of were like, well, maybe we should bring on some other people. And we had been discussing other side projects and stuff with people. So we brought on Alfred Fernandez from Why Wait Till Sunday. We brought on Jarek Backus, Data Wiz, and then Felix Sharp and Matt Bruning, who do Debbie Debate with me and Dynasty Nerds and all that kind of stuff. So it's a good group. We're excited. We're hoping that we start to build something over there.
No, I think you will. I mean, you have some of the smartest people I know. And then you got Matt, the Ohio State fan. We won't talk about him. But yeah, you have those guys, and that's good. I mean, I really am excited about it. And the reason why we brought Austin on today is we're going to talk about Campus to Canton. So I had to throw some Pittsburgh love in for him on his Campus to Canton. And if you don't know what Campus to Canton is, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to be talking about it. It is Debbie on steroids, and I absolutely love it. I loved Campus to Canton, but it takes some work and takes some time. So Austin's we're gonna kind of break down some stuff for you. I'm in 2 Campus to Canton leagues, and that's a lot. How many are you in, Austin?
I'm in 4. And I might add like 1 or 2 more, but that like you said, they're so involved that you can't, it's not like the people that have like 50 or 60 dynasty leagues. I don't think that's possible with this kind of stuff.
I would say 4 is kind of pushing. I feel like I was going to add 1 more and I think I was at my limit. So what we're going to talk about today, first part is like, what is an actual Campus to Canton league? So when we're thinking of this, like what exactly is this kind of a league? So I was going to kind of go over that. And then also, why should we take the plunge in it? So if you're playing Debbie, why should you do it? Or if you're not playing Debbie, what are some reasons for us to take that deep dive?
Yeah, so it definitely, like we were saying, it is more involved. It is a little bit deeper, and it's definitely not as scary as I think it will sound as we start talking about it.
Yeah.
Because I had never even done Debbie before I jumped into my first C2C league. I was like, well, if I'm going to jump in the water, I'm not even going to stick my toe in to see how cold it is.
Exact same thing. My first ever Debbie league was a Campus to Canton league, and I just jumped in.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a rough learning curve for like the first couple months, but after that you come out a pro. So that's I think that's the idea. But it is basically your normal dynasty league. You're running a full NFL style dynasty team with all the same kind of ramifications. You have your regular season, your playoffs, your champion, all of that good stuff. In addition to that, with Debbie, you have, depending on what the size of your league, you have a couple to a lot of Debbie guys kind of on like a taxi squad floating off somewhere, or a Debbie squad that will eventually come up to your team if they make it to the NFL, make it that far. For Campus to Canton, you have a full college fantasy football roster that acts as your Debbie squad or your taxi squad.
Yeah.
And then when those guys graduate, they move up to that NFL side. But in the meantime, they are still kind of, accruing those points weekly in a college fantasy setting on the other side. And that too has regular season, playoffs, and a champion. So 2 bites at the apple to say you're a champion at something. Yeah. Never a bad thing. And just, it opens up so many more possibilities with valuations and things like that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I look at it almost like when people ask me, I say it's like kind of like minor league baseball. You have your AAA team, and then you have your major league team, and you're really building almost like a dynasty, right? Like you're really truly building a dynasty because of the college guys that you get. And usually a Campus to Canton league is 45 rounds. So that's your initial startup. And let me tell you, when you get to that 40, 41st, 42nd round, you're really diving, and you really got to learn these guys because they're deep. And we plan on giving you some guys later that you could be looking at there. Personally for me, why should they take the plunge? I'll answer a little bit just because you get to learn these guys and you can see breakout age. I always get out guys that ask me, like, where do you see these guys? Like a guy like Carson Strong in our league that we're in the program league, which is a little bit different, but it's, I still don't really understand it. But I got Carson Strong, I think in like round 33 last year. And now this year, it looks like he's like maybe a top 5 quarterback for next year. So I think for you can identify players a little quicker.
Yeah, definitely. If you're the kind of person that gets that gratification, and I think most of us are, Dynasty gives you that opportunity as well to kind of be on a rookie guy before they break out or whatever. I think C2C even takes that, like 10, not one step further, like 10 steps further, where you find these guys as, incoming freshmen, and you're watching like this grainy tape of like, someone's mom got from the stands and like the hand is shaking and you're just like, I don't really know what I'm watching, but this kid looks good. Like this stuff like that is just kind of, it adds a little bit to the fun of doing one of these leagues. Yeah.
And just trying to find huddled film, and you're like, where the hell is this film at? And you're trying to look at it, and then you're looking up, and what I do is I always look up competition. So now I got to figure out what Alabama's 4A really means, because in California it's different, because 1A is the highest. And it's funny but I think it's just, if you love football, especially if you love college football, it's just a lot of fun. And it's just an interesting take on what you do in dynasty leagues and so forth. How do you balance your NFL league? Because this is the big question. And I think I know the answer for you, what you put precedence on. But how do you balance the NFL with your campus to Canton league? Like, do you focus on, like, how does that work? What are you kind of looking at there?
That is such a loaded question. Like you said, that is the $1 million question. And I think that there isn't necessarily a wrong way to do it. Like I said, there's playoffs and champions on both sides. If your goal is just to, make your money back and then a little bit have some fun, learn more about Devi, then I could see really prioritizing the college side of things, because I think there is a big knowledge gap for a lot of people there, where if you do that well, you can do very well at it. Mm-hmm. I think the balance is that, the NFL side is usually the priority for most people. And I think that's fair. I think a lot of leagues, the standard right now, and I don't know if that will continue as this grows a little bit, is, there's more money involved in the NFL side. That winner gets more of the pot than college, to kind of put an extra emphasis on it. So I think that people, they'll, instead of picking up a ton of guys that are big time college producers, maybe this tiny little wide receiver in the MAC that catches like 120 catches a year, but like he's like never going to be he's going to be selling insurance after he graduates, like if your goal is the NFL side, maybe you're not loading up on those guys as much. I try to do a pretty solid balancing act. I like diving into the college fantasy side of things. Like I said, I think there's a exploitable knowledge gap there right now for people that are in tune with those sorts of things. So I think I tend to favor winning a little more than a lot of people do on the college side. But at the end of the day, I think the NFL side, like you said, you're trying to build that true dynasty. That's where you're really trying to, beef the squad up.
Yeah, I think there's so many different strategies, and it's a loaded thing. We could actually probably do an hour on strategies of how to build a campus to Canton league and your NFL league. I think one area that I kind of do is, I think one league, what I did is in my NFL side, I built for a win now, and in my campus to Canton side, I took really high upside younger players so that when they finally do get to my NFL team, I can kind of retool, refit, and kind of rebuild that way. But you can do it all kinds of different ways. I do think that, because of, if you do have a strong background in college, you could actually win your college league probably easier with some of the guys jumping into those leagues. Because like you and me, when we first got into it, we did a first campus Canton league. I had no idea what I was really doing. By the time we got to the 15th round, I was looking at 247 Sports, trying to figure out where my guys were at and where were all these dudes. So I think that if you do have the knowledge and you kind of go through and you can kind of find like the Dwayne Eskridges, the Isaiah McCoys, my guy from Kent State, like those guys early, then you could really build something at the college level.
Yeah. And that's, I think, what we're kind of trying to do over, at the website is just make that more approachable, because, like even as recent as 2 years ago, you'd go on Twitter and you'd search, hashtag Devi or hashtag C2C to help you with a draft like this. And you'd scroll a couple times and you're back like 8 months already. Like there was very little info out there. So I think, there's always more info being added to that space. And I think that's a good thing for those of us that enjoy that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. So when you come down to your draft, so our guy Debbie Kane, he talks about it all the time, and he's a big value guy. And when he drafts, I always look at it. He drafts all the quarterbacks, and then he always says he approaches his first 10 to 15 rounds as getting guys that he knows is going to make the NFL. And then after that, it's just kind of okay, guys, I'm gonna fill in place. How do you approach it? Do you just kind of play it by ear as the draft is going, or do you kind of look at like, hey, I need to get 10 guys in the first 10 rounds I know can make the NFL roster?
I do typically do it that way. And I think kind of, as you're going down the tiebreakers, like the first round or two is guys that are going to be high-end draft picks and mega producers in college. And that's a little rarer than you think. But, guys like Spencer Rattler is going really early, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall at Iowa State. Like these are guys that go early because they're probably going to have that nice intersection of NFL value and they're producing now. And then you kind of, after you're done with those guys, then you drive into, well, this guy's probably a good NFL draft prospect. I'm not sure how much he's going to produce in college. That's I'm okay with that. I think it's the fun thing about these is that the landscape changes every year. Yeah. Just the prospect of these kids are only in college for 3 or 4 years. COVID's giving everybody an extra year, so maybe some of them are there for 5. But yeah. It's like so. My last drafts last year, I was punting running back early, and I was hitting wide receiver QB. This year, if I don't get a quarterback in the first 5 or 6, if I don't have a first 5 or 6 pick, I'm just punting quarterback early, and I'm going running back because it's just that's how much with Fields and Lawrence and some of these guys leaving. Like that's how quickly these things shift.
Yeah, no, I would say just by some of the mocks that we've done, I've looked at it, after the first 2 rounds, it gets a little muddy out there. Like you don't really know. Like, and you're just going through it. Even like that later half, like you get Marvin Mims and Raheem Jarrett, these guys at the end of the second, those are okay, but they're not for sure NFL guys yet. Like we think they are. We project them at being that. I would say that first round is really where you're kind of getting it. Even in the later first round, depending on what you think of Jaden Daniels or Slovis and those guys, it's an interesting mindset. There's so many different ways you can go. Do you look, so after the 15 pick, or let's say you're in the later half of that Campus to Canton League, do you really look for those small guys that can like a guy like the Hawaii quarterback, Cordero? Do you like him? Like someone like that? Do you look to draft those type of guys that can really high produce for your college team?
I do. Yeah, that's about the time where I'll start doing that. Maybe a little bit earlier. I've been playing around with that because like we've done 2 mocks together here already this year. We're through with one and we're doing another one, and I sit in on a bunch of other ones that we're rolling through as well. So it is interesting to see where some of those guys land. But I think that generally is the approach after that, and I look more at offenses and say, that's a strong offense. I think, I want, it's an air raid. I'll go get their wide receivers, or it's, like a Mike Leach offense. I want their running back because he's going to catch 90 passes. He's probably never going to make it in the NFL. But, those are the kind of guys where you start, that's the thinking as you hit that point. What is this offense? What is this offensive coordinator, head coach like? What can I reasonably project off of that point?
I'm glad you brought up the offenses. I'm glad you brought up Moy Leach. That's why I'm getting Jacarius Marks everywhere. That's my guy right now. I love that dude. And he's going to produce. That's a good name to think of because he looked good last year, and I think he's going to do even better this year. But I'm glad you brought up the offenses because that's what you kind of do. And you got to look at the conferences. I think that's a big case. I know I was listening to a Debbie debate episode with you guys, and my guy Felix broke my heart because he didn't know that the Mountain West Conference existed. But you really got to kind of go through there and say, like, as a Fresno State guy, because I just live here, so I have season tickets, I know what offenses to really pick up. So that actually is a positive for me because I know the guys in that area. Like Fresno State's gonna have a pretty strong team this next year, and Nevada. But maybe guys on the East Coast that never get to watch Mountain West and don't really know those guys, you can really attack your draft that way and know some of these guys that are out there. But I think that's a good point. I think there's a lot of different ways you can break it down. The second part of this, what we're going to do, and the fun part where everybody's going to get Austin's great knowledge here, and I'm going to steal all his stuff so I can get these guys too, is kind of guys at each position that we're going for. And it can be any class. So we're going through every class here. And really, we're going to go through different areas. So we're going to go high-end prospects, guys that you got to draft. That Austin's going to point out, like, hey, these guys NFL ready. Okay, this is where they're going to go. Some mid-tier prospects that have a shot, and these are always the tougher ones. I feel like because the high upside ones, we're going to look at high upside for Campus to Canton, not necessarily Debbie, but Campus to Canton guys that I think that could do well on your roster. But the mid-tier ones are the ones you really got to hit on sometimes to really kind of exceed your value and to do well at the NFL side. So we're going to go through the positions one by one. We're going to start with quarterbacks because everybody loves quarterbacks, and we'll go through there. So Why don't you give me one or two of your high-end prospects guys for your quarterback position? Who do you have right now?
I think we're seeing a pretty solid top 4 develop at this point. Mm-hmm. And after that, they start being able to pick these guys apart a little bit more. The top 4: Spencer Rattler, Sam Howell, DJ Uiagalelei, and I practiced that in the mirror a bunch of times this morning. In case you couldn't tell.
I did say DJU, so I'm proud of you. Like, that is way better than what I could do right there.
And Bryce Young from Alabama, who's kind of the next guy up there. So those are kind of the big 4, I think. Yeah. I don't think you can necessarily go wrong with any of them. And I think in the drafts that we're doing, we've seen all sorts of different orders. I think the only one I haven't seen go first overall is Bryce Young, just because we got like a game and a half or whatever of DJU last year, 2 games, and we got like 5 snaps here, 10 snaps here of Bryce Young. So that's limiting him. But Bryce Young was rated ahead of DJU last year, and I liked him just a tiny bit more. I liked them both a lot. DJ, kind of your bigger, he's almost like that Dante Culpepper, like just this huge guy with a cannon arm that's pretty mobile and, but not just toolsy. Like he's a smart guy too. He can do a lot of other things. And Young's a little bit smaller, he's like 5'10", 5'11", 190s. Kind of more of that modern scrambling, can make things happen with his legs a little more kind of guy. So I'm actually interested. I'm watching those 2 this year just to see what we think of them after this year. Cause I think, one of them will probably be favored after the year. And if you ended up with that one, then you're happy that you took that gamble on whichever one you snagged.
Yeah, I'm a Bryce Young guy. I'm a Bryce Young truther. I got to watch both these guys in high school, so that's a nice thing about living in California. I got to go to their section title game where they both just killed it. And these 2 guys are legitimately, I think they're both NFL prospects. I think Bryce has an arm. If you watch him play, I love his arm strength. DJ can really throw it. Culpepper, I haven't heard that comp. Look at you throwing out comps. I like it. I'm terrible at comps, by the way.
I am too, but that's like one that I like that I have. That's like, I'll pull it out and then I'm done with it. So.
Look at that. I love the Culpepper comp. I love watching Culpepper when I was growing up. I like that. How would you, now I'm going to throw in a spot here a little bit. How would you rank those 4 guys then? Who would you put as your 1?
It's so tough because I said, I think Hal is probably the better pro prospect by a thin margin over Rattler, but Hal loses a lot of his offensive weapons this year. He loses Michael Carter and Javonte Williams, the 2 rotating running backs there last year. And then Daz Newsome and De'Ami Brown were kind of his 2 go-to receivers. They're both gone as well. And if the bowl game against Texas Tech this year, or Texas A&M, was any indication, I'm not exactly sure what that skill cupboard looks like behind those guys. So I think I want Rattler over Hal. And so I'd probably go like Rattler, Hal, and then DJU and Bryce Young. But it's like those 2 it's razor close. And it's just because, like I said, we saw those 2 games out of DJ last year. Are you still Bryce over DJ?
Yeah, but not like I love what I saw from a DJ in those games. I just think Bryce just didn't get to show it, right? He just so I think that Bryce, this is a big year for both those guys, and I'm excited to watch it. That's my favorite storyline. I don't even care about my Michigan team anymore. I'm just watching those 2 guys every week just to see who can kind of vault themselves up to that level. I'd say Bryce just by a hair because I think that he's a better prospect, but DJ's really close. Like it's razor thin there. What about some mid-tier guys? So I don't know where you're going to go with this because we've seen some guys as stock fall last year. We've seen some guys as raise. So what are some mid-tier guys that you like?
So I wrote down Malik Willis as my first guy.
Okay.
And I wrote him down because I think, people that already play C2C or college fantasy football know Malik Willis. But if you don't, then he probably isn't really on your radar at all. He went to Auburn. He's like a dual threat kid, very, very raw out of high school, sat there for 2 years and then transferred over to Liberty and started there last year. And he put up pretty good numbers, 2,200 yards or so, 20 touchdowns, and then added just a ton of yardage and touchdowns on the ground as well. Yeah. He was, if not the number 1 scoring quarterback in pretty much all the college fantasy leagues last year, he would have definitely been like a top 3 or 4 guy, and he comes back next year. And I think the most of his cast there comes back. My problem with Malik Willis and why I have him as a mid-tier, because he's just not very accurate, like at all. And I keep going back, like every month or two, I'll go back to watch him just to make sure, because I see people talk about him all the time. And then I go back and I'm like, no, he's very, very inaccurate. And I have a very hard time projecting him to play any sort of quarterbacking role in the NFL. Maybe he would go to like the Ravens and be their third quarterback or whatever, that if, Lamar's pooping and, whoever else gets hurt, like he can step in. But like, otherwise, I don't see a role for him in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I think he's a great C2C guy, right? Like he's that guy that's really good, but I don't know about the role. I think that you hit that on the head. But hey, he's a good guy. If you don't know Malik Willis from Liberty, I mean, he was electric last year. He's a lot of fun to watch. That's a guy that you can get. I don't know where he's kind of going. He's going late rounds. I would assume in maybe the 15 to 25 range, maybe 20 range.
He's been going a little earlier than that. So let me I have like the ADP data here, and I meant to actually.
I figured you.
Down, and I didn't. So
I can do a filler. So yeah, I mean, Malik is in there.
I have him as the ADP of 113 overall. Okay. So that's 9th round ish.
Yeah. Okay. That's a little higher.
It's a little higher than I want.
Yeah.
But I also think he's going later in. Not to like label these, but we have like, the heavy hitters ones, and it's like industry guys. And then we're doing ones with like fans and just things like that. And he tends to go earlier in the heavy hitter ones for whatever that's worth. I'm not exactly sure why that is. So
yeah, that's because we got our boy Sharp just taking him all the time.
That's a good point.
So there's a couple guys we have a couple comments. So one, Slovis being slept on. I don't know what to think of Slovis anymore. He was my really high for me, but last year was really bad. So I think, Keaton Slovis from USC has got to step it up this year. What is your opinion on Slovis?
What have you heard about him potentially having a shoulder injury last year? Because you're out there, like, in that news zone.
Yeah, I mean, that's the rumor. The rumor is that he dealt with a shoulder injury and he tried to play through it, but it doesn't seem like he's having surgery. So maybe that's the case. But I know what kind of worries me about that is his freshman year, he dealt with the same thing. Like his arm was getting tired because he threw the ball so much. That was like a constant thing over the offseason. They said, oh, well, he got stronger. And then now all of a sudden we have another shoulder injury and he's trying to use it as that. So I'll be honest, that kind of worries me just a little bit because is that an excuse now or is that what's happening? They didn't look great. I hate that offense. I absolutely hate that offense because there's no creativity. It's literally just Slovis lines up. There's no pre-checks. They snap the ball and now it's okay, Slovis, make something happen. If the first read's not there, it's literally just backyard football like we're playing out in the park, and it drives me crazy. And they have no rushing game. Hopefully that Keontae Ingram helps that, but they really struggle there. So I don't know if it's a Slovis. I don't want to make excuses for Slovis, though. That's the only thing. I feel like I make excuses for him because I like him so much.
Yeah. I'm scared of him, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't think. Like someone was saying yesterday, I saw on Twitter, like he went. I thought he was a 3rd round pick, and I was like, okay, that's the range where like maybe I'm okay with Slovis because I think regardless, even if like there's 3 scenarios with him. One, he comes back this year, he picks back up from where he was as a freshman and develops further. Then he becomes that NFL draft pick. He moves on. You're happy with that value. Scenario number 2. He comes back. He's okay. He never really improves. Maybe he stays a 4th year there. He puts up a ton of points in college. Scenario 3, he sucks. He gets replaced and he's out. So you just have to kind of balance what percentage-wise, what you think those 3 outcomes are going to be.
Yeah, and this is also Slovis is a good cautionary tale for people because he was probably going in the 1st round last year for sure, late 1st round, probably like 110, 112. And now I have seen him go in that 3rd or 4th round. So values will change quickly in C2C. So you really got to make sure you know that. We'll move on to maybe the middle or lower tier, but our guy Sharp left a comment. He talked about Casey Thompson. I know he likes Casey Thompson a lot.
He does.
I wanted to give him some love there. All right. Do you have any middle or low, high upside guys that you like from the QB position?
The only guy that I wrote down here, because that's kind of a crapshoot, and it's basically like you're just getting into like the MAC and like Mountain West. Like that's basically where you go digging for these guys.
Like, the Mountain West.
I'm sorry. They actually are a little bit, strong, and Felix, this guy Hayner, I guess he's listening here.
We're not the Sun Belt. Come on, like we got a little bit of roll like that.
That's true.
Boise.
That's a good point. I always forget about Boise's in that conference. But I put Caleb Elby from Western Michigan, and I have him as like my QB 74 in my rankings, and he's not going, like, we've only done through 15 rounds in these mocks, and he's not getting touched yet, which is more than fair. He shouldn't be. But last year, Mac played shortened schedule, 6 games, but he put up like 1,700 yards, 18 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. It's just a wide open conference. They averaged 42 points a game last year. And on a per game basis, he was QB 14, and a bunch of the guys that were ahead of him graduated or are moving on. So I think a top 10 finish is probably almost a lock. And, you know, like I said, he's like QB 70 something. You know, you pick this guy up in like the 35th round. If you punted quarterback early, now you've got your starter.
Yeah, no, I like that. I'm still some other guys just really quickly. Harrison Bailey. I'm still on the Bailey train. They need to unleash Bailey. I think that offense helps. I think that bringing in the new coach, new system, I think will help him if he wins that job. If he loses to Hendon Hooker as the starting quarterback, that will worry me more than probably anything. I like him. Really quick, Dylan Gabriel, what are your thoughts on him? I've seen some really weird NFL noise with him, and I never really saw that, but I don't know.
Yeah, we talked about it a month or two ago on one of my other shows. I think his arm is like borderline disqualifying as a starting NFL quarterback. Like I've said this, like I have a threshold. Like Joe Burrow's arm strength is about like the lowest I'd be comfortable with projecting a guy. Any lower than that, and it's shaky. And I think Gabriel's lower than that. So he goes like third or fourth round in a lot of these, and that for a guy that has, like, in my opinion, doesn't really have NFL upside, and I'll pass at that value.
No, he needs to be in that Malik Willis value, I think, like the 10-ish, 12, if you want to take that. No, we need an arm strength threshold formula. You and Backus, you guys need to get on that so we can figure that out.
We'll get in the lab. We'll see what we can
get in the lab, because I'm terrible at math. I'm a history teacher, but you guys can figure that out. You guys are smart guys. All right, let's go to running backs now, because I think I don't know what you would think about the running back landscape. I think the 2023 class is loaded, and I think next year's class is interesting. It gets a little muddled in there too. Who are your high-end guys? I know some guys love Brees, some guys don't. I don't know if you wrote him down, but where are your high-end guys that you have to grab?
Yeah, I think there's a pretty distinctive cutoff in the ADP. It's actually kind of interesting with these running backs. So Bijan and Brees are like have ADP in 4 and 6.
Yeah. So
there's like a top tier of like 7 or 8 guys, and they both fall squarely in it. And then Tank Bigsby actually comes in as well at about ADP 8 or 9. I'm a little lower on Tank. Like I like Jahmyr Gibbs a little more than him. I think he's a little bit more versatile of a player, and I just think his skill set is a little I don't want to say safer, but it's just at the translation I have fewer concerns about going into the NFL. But I think regardless, those are kind of the names there. Okay. Bigsby, Spiller, Gibbs, Breece Hall, and Bijan Robinson. And I think if you miss out on quarterback, then you're really happy to take one of those guys as a first-round pick.
Yeah, and I think there's a pretty big tier break after those guys, would you say?
Yes, I would agree with that, both like my personal rankings and just what it seems like is going on in these drafts as well.
What's your opinion of Eric Gray? Because I don't like Eric Gray. I mean, I'm not going to be here and say I don't know him, but as a running back prospect, I don't want him on any of my teams.
So now I see why you brought me on the show, because we agree on like everything with this kind of stuff.
I'm just not a big Eric Gray guy. I just don't see the speed. I don't necessarily think that he's going to translate well to the NFL.
I agree. I think like I watched him and Kyron Williams in the same day, like a month or two ago. Yeah. And I was like, Kyron Williams is what we think Eric Gray is, in my opinion. Like, I think he runs tougher. I think he's just a little bit more dynamic of an athlete, a better pass blocker. And I think Kyron has that backfield basically all to himself. You know, Chris Tyree, a little bit of a changeup guy there. But Gray has to share touches at Oklahoma next year. Like, everyone's like, Oklahoma's a great spot. If he went there for the sole purpose of basically saying, I can showcase my pass catching ability a little more here, and I don't have to put as much tread on my tires for a year before I go to the NFL, then sure, I understand that landing spot. But traditionally, Lincoln Riley rotates the crap out of those backs. They have a ton of them there next year with Gray and Marcus Major and Seth McGowan, and Kennedy Brooks is coming back. Yeah. They have a ton of guys there. So and the touches will be spread out. So I just don't think, third round or second round is good value for him if he's not going to produce. And I question how exactly he translates to the NFL.
And he's going pretty high. I've seen him go as high as 204, 203 in some mocks and some drafts. I would rather get TreVeyon Henderson that's going to Ohio State.
Yes. We talk about that value all the time on like Debbie Debate and other ones. It's like, the only thing suppressing his value is that we just haven't seen him touch a college field, in my opinion. It was the same thing suppressing Bijan last year. And I think we learned a little bit from Bijan, and I think TreVeyon is going a little earlier than Bijan was at this point last year. But he's very, very dynamic, and that backfield is there are touches there for the taking.
Yeah, I think there's more touches in Ohio State than there is at Oklahoma, which is a weird concept now, but I think it's true. And I like Seth McGowan. I actually like him a little bit more than Eric Gray, to be honest. I don't want my Eric Gray truthers to come after me, but that's just kind of where I'm at with the running backs. What are some middle tier guys then that you kind of like?
So I put down here Tyler Algier as my kind of my favorite middle tier guy. I think former walk-on linebacker that transitioned over to running back. He's got really good size, 5'11", 220-ish. He put up pretty good numbers this past year, over 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns, and he had 14 catches and averaged double-digit, yards per reception, which I think is, once you start hitting that point, I start taking you seriously as a receiving threat for, projecting you to the NFL. So he kind of checks all those boxes. He's a good mover. I think he is a guy that might rise all offseason, especially if that offense looks like it might be a little more run heavy to help out whatever quarterback comes in there next year, since they are losing Zach Wilson.
Yeah, no, I like that call. I think that he could step in there, and for middle tier production, right? Like when we're looking at Campus Canton, I think he's a good filler, and I think he can play, and I think you can put him in your lineup, and you can expect a lot on Fantrax or whatever system you have there. DeMarcus Bowman. So my two guys that I've kind of looked at this kind of range. So I'm talking to you went a little deeper. I'm looking kind of maybe guys that can maybe come out of it is Bowman and Noah Cain from Penn State. Those are kind of my guys that I think maybe can shoot up some draft boards, especially in next year's class. What are your quick opinions on those two guys? I
like Cain. I think he's being forgotten about a little bit because of missing, basically virtually all but 3 snaps or whatever of this past season. And then Bowman, I like him. I have no idea what to make of Florida's offense next year, but I also think that uncertainty is baked into his value already. Like, you're not spending a pick 3 rounds earlier than you want to and taking a risk. Like, I think that risk is already being factored in. So where we've seen him going in some of these drafts. So I think they're both probably pretty good values. I'd agree with you on both of those guys.
Yeah, and if you can get Bowman, if you got Bowman last year, you got him way valuable than he probably is now. And so I think that helps you in these drafts and these leagues. But those are two guys that I kind of am in the middle. I don't mind grabbing. It's just a weird vacuum. Like when you're drafting in your Campus Canton leagues, what's going to happen is if you miss on quarterbacks, you better take a running back in that first round, especially if one of those guys is there. You really don't want to pass on one of those top-end running backs, because after the quarterbacks and running backs go in those first 2 rounds, it's pretty barren. And then like we see in the NFL side, the wide receivers is pretty loaded. There's a lot of good wide receivers there. Do you have any high upside, like, whoa, guys that we don't even – I'm sure you have someone I don't even know their name, and you got some guy out there.
I don't think the name is too crazy. Ricky Parks, who's going to Utah, he's an incoming freshman, actually. I think he's the only incoming freshman that I wrote down here to kind of discuss today. And he's going to Utah, low 4-star. He's early enrollee, 5'11", 214. So he's already gained some weight from what he was listed at in high school. And the thing about that situation that's so appealing is that Utah vacates pretty much all of their production from 2020. Yeah. They lose Ty Jordan, obviously, unfortunately. They lose Devin Brumfield, who's going to Tulane, I believe, transfer, and then Jordan Wilmer, who's going over to your Fresno. And I think he's a guy to watch after Ronnie Rivers leaves, but totally different thing. But so they don't really have – they bring in Chris Curry and TJ Pledger from LSU and Oklahoma, respectively. Both of those guys just got majorly outperformed by every other back on the roster. You look at the yards per carry last year at Oklahoma, Pledger averaged 4.7, and everyone else was 5.5 or better. Same thing at LSU. Everybody was 4.5 or better, and Chris Curry was at 3.2 yards per carry. So these guys weren't leaving LSU because they were leaving because they weren't good enough to play there. It's not that they were is so good or that they're trying to boost a little bit of value. So.
No, they just didn't have it. No, I like that call. I that's the biggest Ty Jordan that hurt, because I loved watching that kid play. My couple of my guys, I got to shout out Ronnie Rivers, Fresno State. The guy just scores touchdowns. He 35 career touchdowns rushing, 9 touchdowns receiving. As someone who watches Fresno State, they really give him the ball a lot, and he's a really good sleeper guy in the later rounds if you want to look for production on your campus, the Canton side. I do think he got a little NFL pedigree with his family. Maybe he gets into the NFL depending on that, especially that running back class next year. Maybe he sneaks in there or something. I love Ronnie, and then I'm going to give a shout out to my guy Frank Gore Jr. He's actually going a little higher than I saw. I saw him go a couple times. That's got to be the name, because I don't necessarily wouldn't take him that high. I think I got him in like the 42nd round last year of a draft. And he had a pretty productive year at Southern Mississippi. He had 121 carries, 708 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's someone that, as long as the price is okay, I'm willing to take a risk on.
Yeah, I like him, and it's something to be said, for a guy that has bloodlines.
Yeah.
Whether that actually, I've never sat down and looked at what that actually matters for anything, but I think there's something to be said for you having that background and that training your whole life and those kind of opportunities that maybe some others didn't have.
Maybe I'll guest article on your site, and I'll dive into that. I'll do some research, and I'll go and say, okay, how can I find these guys and their things? All right, good. So I like that. Let's go. Now, this is going to be loaded, guys. The wide receiver, I love the wide receivers. I'm a wide receiver guy and tight end guy, but wide receivers is an absolute loaded class. The high end, I think, is pretty much stayed the same. I'm a big George Pickens guy. I'm not sure where you're at on that. That's my wide receiver 1. I don't care what anybody else says. You guys are wrong. All my David Bell truthers out there, get out of here with that. But I think Pickens is my guy. How about you? Where do your high end kind of guys go?
Pickens number 1. I think we talked about that on Brandon's show like a month or so ago. Yeah, Pickens number 1. I think that he saw his stock dropped last year because he had DeJuan Mathis and Stetson Bennett throwing to him. If that's why you're dropping him, then you need to reevaluate. If you're dropping him because you're concerned, there's rumors that he's a little immature. I guess I understand that a little bit. We don't want a Darius Geis situation or something like that. But, I don't think the concerns are that level. So it doesn't scare me away. I think we're seeing there's definitely a top 5, but I tack the 6th guy on just because I like him. And I think that he belongs in that discussion. We used to have David Bell's going wide receiver 1 typically. I think that's just because Purdue is a total funnel offense to him, and he's going to have 150 catches next year, 200 targets. So it's just insane how much they're going to target him next year. Then you have Garrett Wilson at Ohio State, George Pickens, obviously, like we just said, at Georgia, Treylon Burks at Arkansas, an intriguing guy, just a big, Chase Claypool, but was actually good in college, which is kind of scary because we saw Chase Claypool do some things this year in the NFL. Kayshon Boutte, he's probably the 2023 wide receiver 1 at LSU. And I'm a little pumping the brakes a little more on him just because he produced last year, but it's because literally everybody opted out. Yeah. Jamar Chase was gone. Justin Jefferson went to the draft. Eric Gilbert left after a few games. Terrace Marshall left after a few games. Somebody had to catch passes in that offense. It was him. So I'm not sure, projection wise, whether it's as clean as people want to make that seem. Yeah. And then I tack Raheem Jarrett on the end as well. He was the kid at Maryland. And he was a 5-star last year, ended up staying home, going to Maryland instead of, some of the bigger schools that were looking at him. I just think he's a very dynamic player. He only played a couple games last year, but he had that huge 200-yard, 3-touchdown game or whatever. I just think by the end of next year, I don't think there's going to really be much separating him and Boutte. And you can get Jarrett, ADP for Boutte is 15, Jarrett's 22. So he's going a half, if you picked one of those quarterbacks early on the way back, you can probably get Jarrett, and you're really happy with those 2 picks.
Yeah, getting a Spencer Rattler Jarrett stack would be a dream. I think that's kind of where I would love that. I like Jarrett. He's actually kind of climbing a little bit more. Since Demas is dead, or I don't know what's going on at Texas A&M. I feel like Jarrett has actually kind of gone over that and done that. I like those groups. I think Pickens is my wide receiver 1 and Wilson's my wide receiver 2. Those are kind of the 2 guys that I have right next to each other. Where do you see Marvin Mims then? Because Mims is one of my guys, but I don't think I agree. I don't think he's there yet, but I think he has a chance to maybe get into that wide receiver 2 conversation in that class.
So I like Mims, and I liked Mims a lot last year just because, if you're a mega producer in high school at Texas at a high level, it draws my attention immediately. Him and Jackson Smith and Jigba were both like that last year. And that kind of, if I have a tiebreaker between some guys, the level of football there is just a different thing. It's a different beast. So that kind of does separate a little bit in my eyes. my problem with Mims, and it's not a problem actually with Mims, is just I think I'm not sure who the alpha wide receiver in that offense is actually going to be next year, with Theo Weiss there, who flashed a couple games, and then Hasselwood coming back as well. And obviously, like we said, that stable of running backs, they have a decent tight end as well. Whose name is it? Stogner that's there.
I think so. Still there.
Yeah. So they have a lot of weapons. I'm just not sure. Like, I would rather take like Hasselwood in like the 7th or whatever he's going in, because I think the value is almost identical to a Mims who's going in the 2nd or 3rd.
That's fair. Hasselwood is a deep sleeper, guys, out there. I think he was injured last year. People kind of forgot about him, but he was going pretty high in drafts last year, and then he got injured over the summer, and people have kind of slept on him. But I think he could be that breakout guy that you're like, oh, who the heck? Where did this guy come from? It's like, well, he's been there. We just forgot the talent that he has. So, no, I think that's a good call with Mims. If you're drafting him that high, you're hoping for high upside. I think it's a risky pick in the 2nd. If you're taking him in the 2nd, that's definitely a risky pick. So what are some middle tier guys that you like?
I highlighted LV Bunkley Shelton, who I think I'm going to have to start the Church of LV Bunkley Shelton here soon, because I just preach the gospel about him every time I go on a show. He was so Arizona State kind of famously, I guess, for those who follow recruiting as nerds, they brought in a huge wide receiver class last year, like a bunch of 4-star guys, which is, obviously draws attention because you don't really think of Arizona State doing that. And Bunkley Shelton was my favorite of the 4 that they brought in. He's, a little bit smaller. He's not tiny, but he's not, he projects maybe more as a slot. I think he can probably play outside if he wants to, but we'll see. But like, he was getting all the coach speak last offseason, which I love. He produced in limited action this year, 100 yards, 11 catches. I think he technically broke out. I feel in like Arizona State 4 games or whatever. Like I'm not sure you can actually take anything away from that because of the 4 games, and one of them was against Arizona, and they just absolutely just
Arizona's bad.
It was over like 5 minutes into it. I was watching that game live, and I was like, oh, okay. So I'm not sure what you can really take from that first year, but I really, really, really like him.
Okay. I like him too. And he actually he produced pretty well in a crappy year for Arizona State. They got hit with COVID, and they just got like games canceled, moved around. And so that actually makes me think like, hey, you know what? He stepped up and he had a pretty productive year in probably one of the worst Pac-12 years we've seen just because of COVID and the way they scheduled. I like him and Jaden Daniels, who I also like. I like Jaden, and he put on some muscle, baby. So let's keep doing that, Jaden. I think that we could see those two guys making a pretty formidable duo. I want to give a shout out to your pick guy, Jordan Addison. I've been on the Jordan Addison train last year. I got him in a lot of leagues. Shout out to Debbie Diamonds, because I found him. I was searching some articles up, and I saw him on one of their articles way early, and I was like, you know what? This kid is pretty good. He had 60 catches last year, 666 yards, that's kind of alarming. 4 touchdowns, but he's a big play guy. The thing I like about Jordan is that guy gets the ball, and he's dynamic. Now, he did have some, I would say, some consistency issues sometimes. I don't know if that really was because of him or Pickett throwing him the ball in that offense, and kind of he was the only guy there. I mean, and they went away from him a lot. I watched a lot of Pittsburgh football last year. I'm not really sure why.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you did that, because I'm a Pitt fan. It's not fun.
I loved Addison. That's why I kind of tended to watch them, and I always watch them in the morning over here in California. But I always felt like they went away from him. They didn't really get him as involved as I like to see. But I think Addison's a pretty good draft pick right now. I believe I saw him. He's going in that weird range. I think it depends if someone falls in love with him. But I think he's around like 5th, 6th round-ish. I think he's in that range. And I think that's pretty good value for a guy like Addison. But I'm a big believer in Addison. I think that he does things that are well. I think he's going to have that breakout age that we're going to like. I think he has that explosiveness. And I think he's just going to get better from here on out. Because he was a young guy, lower prospect. He's developed.
Yeah, I like him a lot too. I think the inconsistency can be tied to just, like you said, that Pitt offense is
not great.
Not great. And Pickett missed some games last year. and our backup quarterbacks, Pitt isn't the kind of team like Bama, someone goes down and they just bring out the next 5-star kid and plug him in a quarterback. Like we don't have that. We really at really any position except for D-line. I'm excited for our D-line next year. But
you guys do have a strong D-line. Like yeah. I like some of the D-line. Rashad Weaver, some guys coming from there that I like in this draft.
Well, they graduate like the whole D-line, but they bring in like Aaron Donald's nephew this year, who's a 4-star. A couple other like mid-4s, legit 4-star kids. So it's I guess that's going to be Pitt's calling card over the next couple of years. But regardless, yes, I do like Addison.
Yeah.
I am worried about his production. He has Pickett back next year, so he'll probably produce next year. That junior year might be rough, and it might scare drafters and like rookie drafts off to the point where he ends up becoming like the value that year. And then like 3 years down the line, we're like, well, we should have seen that coming because he did so well the first 2 years, but we ignored all the context and just looked at the numbers. And so he could be that guy.
I saw him comp to Emmanuel Sanders on that website, and I think that's a fair comp. I actually like that comp, and that's a good value for him. Who are your high upside guys? Let me hear your Sunbelt guys right here, or someone out there that you think could really produce.
So going into like bowl season, I prepped a bunch of articles, kind of when I was still at Dynasty Nerds over there, and then some other stuff for the site, just saying like, these are guys that I want in like the 40th round. And one of the guys that I put in all those articles was Corey Rucker from Arkansas State. And because Arkansas State is one of those, like I was saying earlier, those offenses where you just, the wide receiver 1 graduates and then a new guy comes out and fills the exact same shoes and does the exact same thing and produces really, really well and then leaves. And then the next guy steps up. They've had Omar Bayless and Jonathan Adams Jr. were kind of the last 2 guys. Rucker was the guy I was betting on to do it. And then he went out in that freaking bowl game and put up like 200 yards. And I was like, no, stop blowing up my spot, man. Like now I can't get you anywhere for cheap. So he's a guy that I think is a later pick, obviously being boosted a little bit by that. He's not going to be 40th round anymore. He's going to be on some radars.
Yeah, no, I agree. But hey, I think that's we're talking about high upside. I think there's still high upside there. I don't know. I don't know if you like Brennan Presley from Oklahoma State. I kind of like him in that upside category. He's a little smaller guy, 5'8", 165. He'll probably put some weight on. But Oklahoma State's kind of losing some of their guys too, and I could see him getting a lot of volume there. He plays bigger than he is on their hands, but he also had a good damn bowl game against Miami, so that pushed up his value a little bit too much for me. But I like him. And then another guy that I kind of like is Xavion Capers from Auburn. But he's not going to go – he'll be in that middle tier too. But the Capers is someone I think he's 6'4", 200. He's explosive. Auburn I think is going to be retooling. They lost 3 of their top wide receivers last year. So keep an eye on Capers. I think those guys are high upside guys that can maybe vault themselves into that NFL range pretty soon.
Yeah, Auburn's got a lot of those guys. All those teams that we just talked about there. They lose all their production, and it's trying to figure out who steps in there, and if you do, you hit that fantasy gold.
Yeah, and that's where you got to shoot for. I mean, everybody can get the top 10 guys. So you really got to find these guys. And that's why you got to go to their website and go to it, because they'll have these guys that you're like, who is that? But I cannot tell you that I trust these guys more than anything when I come to these guys. And if I ever have a question about prospects, I will send it to Austin and Felix and these other guys, and I'll be like, hey, what do you see this guy? Just because I need to know if I'm drafted right. And so you go to these guys. So let's go to tight ends, my favorite position, my lovely tight ends, even though I get crap because I took Cade Otton in a mock draft recently, but I don't care. I'm a Cade Otton stan now. Tight ends is another position that after the top couple guys, this is would you say this is the hardest position to scout and kind of hit on?
Yes, just because, especially in college, they don't really produce.
Yeah.
So it's almost all projection. You're like, well, this guy's big and he's fast and he's strong and he looks like he can catch, or like those 10 targets he got. It's like the Tommy Tremble conundrum. It's he looks the part. I don't know. We'll see if he can actually do it. So it is hard to say. You're a big Cade Otton guy? I
love Cade Otton. I think that I did a big profile on him before I even started really all this stuff last summer. And I was looking at him, and I think that when you watch him, he's hit that. I don't know if you agree with me here, but when you look at tight ends, I'm looking at, okay, they're probably going to redshirt their freshman year. Most of them redshirt their freshman year. How much weight do they put on, and then how much opportunity do they get, and then they start slowly breaking out. And Cade's kind of fall on that path. Yes, he redshirted. He kind of played like a hybrid wide receiver in high school. If you watch his tape, I mean, he literally was the best athlete on that team. So they gave him end arounds and all this other stuff. So he didn't necessarily play tight end. He had to sit behind a couple guys at Washington. And then he finally had his year. And I think he kind of reminds me of, like, I keep using the example, but like a Todd Heap-ish kind of K-Dot, K-Dot and Todd Heap kind of category. But he can actually run after the catch. I actually think I don't think he's going to be a superstar, but I think he could be a very solid prospect in the NFL.
Oh, I agree. I really like Cade Otton. He's my tight end 4 in all of college right now.
See, you and me are fine. See, I don't know what Colin was thinking when he was making me that. I think Cade Otton is that. He's that tight end 4. I think that's a perfect spot for him.
Wait, was it the Campus to Canton account that was roasting you?
Yes. Or was that
That's
you?
not Colin. That's not Colin.
Not?
It's not me either. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. His name rhymes with Schmaufrid Schmermandez, but other than that, I can't give any names. So if you were getting roasted.
Now I directed all my hate towards Colin, and now it was Alfred that I have to direct my hate to. I was going to invite him.
I didn't say that.
I was going to invite him to talk about his Florida Gators too, but no more. But yeah, I believe Cade. I believe in Cade. I think he's a sneaky guy that you can grab.
Yeah, no, I agree. And this is the only other guy, like, I know there's a lot of question marks around Eric Gilbert now.
Yeah.
For those that don't really follow, tight ends in college or whatever, he's the highest rated tight end recruit ever, according to 24/7 in their composite. He went to LSU as a true freshman this past year and was like their leading receiver, their second leading receiver after Terrace Marshall through 6 or 7 games. And then he opted out. He said he was homesick. He said he wanted to go back closer to home. And so we decided on Florida about a month later. And then this past week, he announced that he actually is not going to Florida. And it sounds like it's probably grades related. Mm-hmm. And now is looking for another home. So I think that's starting to scare people off of Gilbert a little bit. Maybe he takes a JUCO route or something for a year. We were joking, he's going to be the best player in JUCO by a freaking mile. But at the same time, good luck finding a JUCO quarterback that can really get the ball into his hands. I'm not sure how he would produce there, but I think he's still. Oh,
no, go ahead. No,
you still need to be paying attention to him, even if he's out of sight, out of mind for a year.
Someone asked me, like, what was the best landing spot for him, and I said, well, I'm just worried about him playing college football at this point because it just seems like there's a lot of other things going on around him. But I still think you have to do that. Would you put Michael Mayer ahead of him?
No, I wouldn't. It's pretty close. Yeah. And I wrote an intro piece on Mayer last offseason saying, like, just because Gilbert's out there, don't sleep on this kid. He's pretty good. Yeah. And he went into Notre Dame. I thought Tremble would be more of the focus this year and then he would leave. It turned out the opposite. So I think it's definitely wheels up for him next year, especially with no Tremble there in 2021.
Yeah, no, I can see some high production there. It's weird. Next year's class, I think, Rucker going back was probably good for him from Ohio State. I'm not a big Rucker guy. There's a lot of Rucker guys out there. I'm a wait and see with him. I got to see someone get more than 200 yards receiving in a season before I say, oh yeah, that's my guy. But that's what we're talking about with production. I don't know really how to define Rucker. Who are some other guys that you kind of targeting?
There's really a big drop off, in my opinion, after tight end 3. Yeah. And that's, Gilbert and Mayer, like we just talked about, and then Jalen Weidermeyer, who's probably the top guy in next year's class. Texas A&M, a guy that was brought in there to be their blocking tight end, along with Baylor Cupp. And then Cupp's been perpetually injured, and Weidermeyer stepped in there, hasn't skipped a beat, and has been basically their leading guy. Yeah. I really, really like him. And I think if you miss out on those two, I have no fear. Weidermeyer doesn't probably have the upside that those guys have. He's not quite that level of athlete, but very good blocker, very sure hands, can do a lot of things, possession-wise, moving the chains. And I think he should be a guy that you're looking at behind those top 2 guys.
Yeah, I like that. I like my guy, Reality Check. I love you, Reality Check. You're a good guy. He asked, any love for Darnell Washington? I don't really like Darnell. I'm not saying that I don't like him as a prospect, but his size, he's a big guy, and it worries me, actually. He's almost too big. He's 6'7", 261. He's almost too big. It worries me how much upside that he really has and his ceiling for me. What do you think of Darnell?
I would literally have said the same exact thing. There really is a point where you're too big, and I worry that it's him. And he's also, for the position, for how big he is charm and soft. He doesn't want to block at all, and he doesn't really want to get physical with people at all. And I think if you're going to be a monster like size like that, you gotta be out there kind of manhandling guys a little bit. And he just isn't doing that. And the thing about that is, like, I think if you said like, well, he loves to rough people up, but he can't really run routes. You could teach the route running and some of that stuff. I don't think you can really teach a guy to toughen up. If he's 18, 19 years old and at a major Division I program, he's not really willing to put a hat on someone. I don't think that develops.
No. And when you watch him run, he shies away from that contact. A guy that big, lower your shoulder, get into guys. He doesn't do that. He goes down first hit in the legs, boom, he's done. And for me, Darnell's not somebody. I see him go really high, and I'm not drafting Darnell that high. I would rather take Cade Otton in like the 12th, 13th round over Darnell Washington and like wherever he's gone. I've seen him go all the way in the 5th, 6th round. I think that's more name recognition than anything. There is a guy that I like. I like Greg Dulcich from UCLA. I like his upside. And then we talked about pedigree, like family pedigree. Hudson Henry from Arkansas. I'm a little worried because he can't. I don't know why he's not seeing the field. And again, their quarterback situation, their offense was a mess. But I think Hudson could be a guy. He's obviously he's related to Hunter Henry. He's literally, I feel like, going to be his brother. Just gives me 8 fantasy points in the NFL. But I think that he could kind of have that pedigree to kind of come up. Do you have any opinions on those two guys? Tight end's really tough, guys, but those two guys I feel like have some upside.
Yeah, I like Hudson Henry. I have him as like my tight end 17, but like it's just a whole pool of like like we said, you're not getting production out of any of those guys. Now you're just kind of splitting hairs as to what you think they're going to do in the NFL. I do really like it's a guy, and he's like a wide receiver tight end hybrid, but I think he should be on people's radars this year. Is Malik Carr, who's over at Purdue. Probably can get him really, really late. He was getting like some buzz last offseason, but I haven't really heard anybody talking about him too much this year. Rondale's gone. They need a second pass catcher. He's just really, really athletic, and he looked really good, at some of the camps and stuff his senior year, kind of going into college. I think he's a guy that, by this time next year, which is just based on his athleticism alone, you could be talking about him in like that, Jaleel Billingsley is getting a lot of hype for that reason, and I think you could see a similar type of rise to that.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And then the last guy I'll kind of touch on real quick is my Mountain West guy. I got to give some more or less love here. Cole Turner from Nevada. I wrote a really good piece on him because he actually switched from wide receiver to tight end, and he actually gained 30 pounds of muscle. Well, 30 pounds. I don't know if it was all muscle to play tight end. He had 605 yards, 9 touchdowns last year. He's playing with Carson Strong. I think Turner's a guy that has a lot of upside, but also he actually can produce for you in campus camp leagues. And they love his versatility in the goal line. You see his red zone targets. They give him 2 or 3 red zone targets a game, and they love putting him out there, and he has matchup problems all over the field. So, and now we're going to see another year. So he played a year at tight end. Now we're going to see another year of tight end. We could see him consistently kind of go there. He's 6'6", 240. Turner's a guy that I really like, especially for campus camp leagues, and he's later pick, and you can grab him maybe for some NFL upside.
He reminds me a lot of Robert Tonyan, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's kind of who I see when I watch him play. I think he can do some similar things. All of these guys are like kind of situation dependent in the NFL, like Tonyan is. So, but yeah, I think that he should at least be in the back of your mind, especially if he goes to a nice landing spot, in a year or two when he comes out.
Yeah, no, I think so. All right, so you know what? We're gonna wrap up here, but I'm gonna throw a couple of curveballs at Austin. I didn't want him to prepare too much for this. I just am gonna ask him, some freshmen that he likes, maybe that you're targeting in drafts. Just one from each position. Doesn't have to be a high freshman. We know we talked about a couple of these guys. What quarterback? Now the quarterbacks are not as. I would say you got to be careful with the quarterbacks. Don't go to 247 Sports and just go to the first 2 because there's some deeper guys that I like a little bit better than some of these guys that are out there. So who is a freshman that you want to try to grab at the quarterback position no matter what? You're going to try to lead with him.
I don't really want any quarterbacks at value this year, to be completely honest. I like Tyler Buchner. I'm just not sure. I think Jack Cohn probably starts this year because of now Notre Dame is with that kind of stuff. And
you can't trust Brian Kelly.
I don't trust him at all. No, not as far as I can throw him. I like Sam Heward as a thrower, but he doesn't really fit that modern, what we want in a quarterback anymore. So that's kind of scary. I almost think the best guy, I don't even like Caleb Williams, but he's going in the 4th round. And we know that these Oklahoma quarterbacks, as soon as it's their turn, they like Spencer Rattler was going like late first, early second last year, having never touched a college football field. Yeah. Like there was just value in having the Oklahoma quarterback.
Yeah.
And so like, but again, Williams might go too early for me to be happy with taking, a little bit of that risk where I basically take him for a year, Rattler leaves, and then I just try to push him onto somebody else.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair kind of comparison. I agree with you. I agree with you there. These quarterbacks for me are very weird. There's not like a Bryce Young kind of type talent in this class. Someone's going to be popping up somewhere. I don't know necessarily where that's going to be, but someone's definitely going to be popping up. And be like, I love Tyler Buchner a lot. I've liked him for a while, but I don't trust. I don't trust Brian Kelly. He doesn't start his freshmen, and he doesn't trust freshmen, as you saw from Jordan Johnson, another wide receiver Notre Dame I loved coming out of high school. And he just sat there, and you have talent there, and they needed wide receiver, and you're like, why are you not putting them in there? You need that. But I don't see that. The one guy I will bring up is Kyron Drones from Baylor. I think he could have an opportunity to start. So in campus to camp formats, you might want to grab him because I think he could be that early starter. Running backs, give me a guy that you're like, hey, that's my guy.
Well, I think Travion's like way too easy of an answer, already going in the second round of startups without ever playing a snap at Ohio State. So I think after that, you start dipping into like the Travion Cooley would probably be my guy after that. Going to Louisville, it's a pretty open backfield. And I've heard some people say, I don't think he's going to just go in there and take the job day one and it's going to be his and he's going to get all the touches there. Like, I just don't think that's the game plan for him. They have Jalen Mitchell and Hassan. I forget what his last name is, but they have two other guys there that can take some touches. And so he'll be, the upside might be a little limited production wise year 1 and year 2, but he just, for where he's ranked as like a high 3. So I think he's like the highest 3-star in the composite or whatever running back. I think he's significantly better than that.
Yeah, I saw him in mock that we recently did, and I saw our guy Corey take him, and then you were talking about him, Travion Cooley, and I looked him up. I like him. I really do, and I think that landing spot is good for him because he could get those touches. A guy I like is Phil Maffa from Clemson. I kind of have a crush on him right now. He's kind of my running back darling. He's going to go in there with Shipley, but there's a lot of vacated targets there. The transfers, you got ETN left, and you have all these different guys there. So I like Maffa there. Freshman wide receiver.
So I have like a hashtag my guy every year, and Lonnie White Jr. is my guy this year, going to Penn State, which really pains me to say as a Pitt fan because I just despise Penn State with every inch of my being. But he Wildcat quarterback for pretty much all high school, and then senior year they said we're going to full-time you at wide receiver because we think that's probably your future. And he only played 4 games this year, so there's limited tape. But when I assess hands for guys, I do it a little differently. I have my categories broader. I consider catching technique, catch radius, ability to transition quickly from like pass catcher to ball carrier. And I think of all the guys in this class, like I would never have guessed if I didn't know that he'd basically never played wide receiver before this year, that was the case. He is just very, very technically refined, which I think speeds up his development for a guy that is very good athletically at like 6'2", 210. Like he's already almost got NFL size. Mm-hmm. So I really, really like him. And I think, he's, another guy, maybe he has to wait a year. I don't know if Penn State can support 3 guys and they have Jahan Dotson and Parker Washington. They already, but Dotson leave after this year. And then it's all his, I think.
Yeah, no, I think I like him. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about your guy. I know that he's kind of your guy there. So we all have our guys that we really like coming out of there. Lonnie's a great prospect, and I think he there's some top wide receivers in this class. So then we're thinking about we see these guys kind of fall a little bit, but Lonnie's a great pickup out there, guys, for what you have. I'm going to go chalk, but I like Troy Franklin. He's going to Oregon. He's from out of here in my neck of the woods. So I think Troy's going to step in there. Oregon, they need wide receivers, even though my Mekhi Pittman shares are hurting me right now because, come on, Pittman, you're killing me. But I think Troy can step in there and do pretty well. I won't do tight ends because who the hell knows about tight ends at this level. But we'll stay there. So I appreciate you coming on, Austin. Why don't you tell us again, what do you give us some secrets here of what's coming next at Campus of Canton? What can we expect? Talk about maybe how they can sign up for a membership and go from there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So the website is campus2canton.com, the number 2 in there, in the middle. We have a lot of articles over there. We have rankings, campus and Canton side separated out. We are working, we're doing a lot of these mock drafts. So we're trying to build some ADP, some solid ADP. Because, we do some of these drafts now and like there's a blatant draft where people just forgot about somebody because there's no list out there and the guy, a guy just falls through the cracks. So we want to, we're working to solve that problem. We have, the pods on there, Devy Debate, Why Wait Till Sunday, Campus to Canton. If you want to go over there and sign up, we have a Discord available for members. And starting like in the next week or two, we're going to start doing a bunch of different members only, like, ranking shows. All of us, the 6 guys over there doing a call together, talking about stuff. So, and we have some other stuff too that I can't say. But so there is a lot of stuff coming here over the summer that we are very excited about.
Yeah, and I think, and how much is it to sign up for the year? Is it like 20 or?
So it's $2.99 a month, and you can do that option, or it's $29.99 for a full year. So,
and it's worth it, guys. Listen, it's worth it, and you should definitely jump on it. And these guys are some of the smartest guys that I know in the industry, and they're good guys. And even though one's an Ohio State fan, they are really good guys, and they care about your fantasy teams. And I actually hate that they're doing ADP now because I'm not going to be able to steal people anymore because people are just going to go to their website and figure out who they should draft.
It's a problem. Someone DM'd us yesterday and was like, I'm doing this draft and like you guys just talked about these 3 dudes and they all just went like sequentially. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, that's good to hear. It's going to suck when I start drafting in like, June or July, but
you heard our bottom line there, Austin. Yeah. You're hurting my money making 15th round picks. But no, you got to go check these guys out. I hope you listen to the pod, get involved in this Campus Canton leagues, reach out to them. You can reach out to me and I can touch base with them. If I know they're going to be doing stuff where you can find leagues, which is a very hard thing to do right now, especially and leagues you trust. And hey, can you fill these leagues? Because I've seen it where people just kind of leave because they don't know what a Campus Canton is. So, you don't want these type of leagues to fold. So go to their website, follow them. I appreciate you coming on. It was a lot of great knowledge. And everybody else, if you listen to the pod, be sure to subscribe, like, do all those things. It'll be on our YouTube page. But follow these guys. I can't say enough about them. And I appreciate you coming on, Austin.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Did you get all that? If not, make sure you head over to hammercast.com, subscribe, and join the Hammer Nation. Until next time, keep grinding.